Hello, welcome to the session on teamwork, student, faculty, staff collaboration for better course teams. My name is Erin De Silva. I'm the Assistant Director for Learning Design and Technology at Dartmouth College, and with me is my colleague, Will.
I'm Will Cowan. I'm a web application developer and team lead at Dartmouth ITC.
In this session, we'd like to talk to you about a technology that we've built called the Team Formation Tool. We're going to start off by describing why we are approaching this tool in the first place. And then we're going to discuss how the collaborative model that we put together at Dartmouth in order to accomplish this functions. We're going to walk you through the tool itself. So we are going to both talk about a team and a team formation tool together. And then we're going to wrap up with some challenges that you may want to avoid if you're going to be implementing a process like this at your school or university. So let's go ahead and get started. You might ask why a team formation tool is something that an educational technology group at a college or university would look into building. And there are some existing technologies out there that do different versions of this. What we're focusing on here today is the idea that instructors want to create student groups that function as effective teams for learning. Now, what does that mean to be effective? Instructors put student groups together for a variety of different reasons, right? They could be a short-term group situation. They could be partners over time. But there are functions and features that instructors need to consider when doing this. So when we talk about making a student group effective to accomplish a particular learning goal, we understand that there's a lot of research about how this might be done. For example, in computer science, we learned from some research that will be cited in the materials for this presentation that isolating a member of a particular minority group in computer science can mean that the team doesn't function as well and that no one in the group learns as much as the instructor is hoping that they will. So that could be one characteristic that we need to think of. Other characteristics might be, which time zone are you in? Or are you a leader? And do you prefer to be a leader in a particular group situation? There are lots of things that an instructor can think about as they try to place students together. Do they want to have friends who work together? Or do they want to have people using this opportunity to get to know each other so that they can go through that group norming process in a different way? As we work with instructors at Dartmouth and identify these learning objectives that they have for a particular team, it became very clear that we needed a technology that was going to allow instructors to do this in ways that were both effective and also efficient. And thus, the Team Formation Tool project was born for us. So this is how we approached it. We'll talk a little bit about our teams.
So on a project like this, normally what we would do is work as a staff team to develop an application to suit the needs of the requester, right? In this case, the faculty members. But for something like this, it's going to be used very widely by many faculty and many students. And we felt that the best approach was to put together a team of all three populations. So we have staff developers from the Information Technology and Consulting Group. We also brought in a student team from the DALI Lab, the Digital Arts Learning Lab project. And we also brought in our faculty member, that would be Petra Bonford Taylor, who teaches programming and uses student teams in her groups quite frequently. She, along with the student, created an algorithm to generate groups. Bringing these three groups together, the staff, the students, and the faculty, allowed us to represent all of the voices, right? The technology side, integrating with our servers, integrating with our Canvas instance, the students, how they want to be represented in class, and how they can conduct user research to find the best way to create an easy-to-use, intuitive tool, and the faculty member, ways to implement their algorithm in an automated fashion instead of a handcrafted code fashion, as she had been doing. The algorithm is the most important part of this project, and implementing it in a way that other folks can use is key to creating these groups. The algorithm is a random shuffle. It takes the students and their answers and shuffles them into groups. At that time, it scores those groups based on the settings for the questions in the survey. It then reshuffles those groups and continues to score the groups that it creates, trying to find the optimal groups for those students by their optimal score. If the score isn't reached, the user is warned that they'll need to readjust their weights and measures for their questions. Once we've created groups, we can publish them into Canvas. Question types can be handled differently. For instance, there's a concept of non-exclusion for certain types of multiple choice questions, instead of simple similarity or difference. And this concept is something that we're actively developing, and this tool will continue to have new versions as we move forward.
So these teams are many people over time, and each group of people at the time that they were involved in this project brought a different set of strengths. So let's talk a little bit about the Dartmouth staff members and the strengths that they were able to bring to the tool development. Will?
So the staff strengths for this tool was largely related to access and advice. So we're talking about real systems access. Often, when Dolly students create applications, they're creating them only in test instances or as proofs of concept. For this application, we're going to take their work and bring it directly to our production servers. To do that, we need to be able to give them access to our environments to deploy code. And that has both technical implications and policy implications. Letting students into our technical backend systems traditionally has been a little difficult to achieve. This project was a way to develop policies to allow students to access those servers, to deploy code on their own using our continuous integration processes, to install LTI applications directly into Canvas courses in our Canvas test instance, and then provide privileged access to that instance so they can act as instructors or even administrators to make sure that the development work they're doing works correctly. As part of that, we had to provide instruction and advice. We had to teach them our code base, our frameworks like Ruby and Rails, and the tools we use like Jenkins for continuous integration and deployment. And we had to teach them the best practices for enterprise code. The idea that we could recreate the wheel for a lot of our tool components is something that you can do when you're working very quickly and for a small project that doesn't have a long lifetime. But for something like this, where we want to roll it out to many courses and be able to maintain it over time, we need code that can be maintained, modified by developers who didn't work on the project originally. That maintainability also extends to running the algorithm. As we mentioned earlier, the faculty member had to handcraft Python to create groups. This system has to be able to take those weights and measures and implement them based on configuration rather than code. Handcrafting a code isn't scalable, but making something a configuration item that faculty members can select is.
And scalable over time is really important, especially when you work with groups of students who like to graduate. They keep insisting on that that's an important part of their plan. So it's really important to recognize and take advantage of the strengths that they bring when a student is working with us on a particular project. We feel really lucky that we were able to do that on this project. I'd like to speak about two main things that the students really contributed. One was that the students in the Dolly Lab had a lot of focus and training around user research and user-based design. This allowed them to take the time and to have the motivation to do some very significant research with their own instructors, with their own professors. They were able to do interviews and focus groups. They were able to show wireframes to instructors and get reactions. And this type of research, when it's done by a student, yields a different result. And so we were able to get some great qualitative data from the students who were working on this project as they worked through what the cases would be in their own classes with their own instructors. And here are just a couple of examples. But the Dolly students also bring a significant design background. And so they spent a good deal of time working with us on standing up wireframes and workflows that were going to give us not only a preview of how the tool would work, but then really get into the interface design itself. And that brought up some great conversations as we all looked at the language around this particular task that we were trying to accomplish, didn't it, Will?
Well, that's true. And it's important to recognize that when we're talking about these kinds of algorithms, we're going to be talking about data that in ways that might seem insensitive. For instance, exploring questions about gender and ethnicity in the classroom. The students themselves were actually a great resource for how to represent those questions sensitively, right, in ways that they wanted to be represented in class, while still being able to use that algorithm effectively. There was a lot of back and forth talking about how do we make the questions appropriate for the classroom while still using sort of the hard data underneath.
that discussion was so rich and so helpful. And I think for both sides of the staff, the student, and the faculty, for all three of us. So let's walk through the tool itself and give you an idea of what we're talking about. Will?
Sure. So what we'll do is we'll log into our Canvas instance and log into a course. And today, in this screen, we're a faculty member. This application has sort of three phases. There's the initial setup by a faculty member. There's the student answering the survey questions. And finally, there's the faculty returning and managing that survey to turn it into groups and publish those groups into Canvas. And so here you'll notice on the left-hand side, team formation at the very bottom. If we were to click that, you'll find that you're asked to log in as that faculty member. Remember, what's going to happen is in our Canvas instance, this tool will act on your behalf to create those groups, and this is what allows you to do so. After authorization, you're brought to the tool. Here you'll notice that I'm an instructor in the upper right-hand corner, and I have no surveys yet, so I'll click Create Survey. And I'm presented with a series of presets. These presets have been developed over time, and we can add and remove questions from this preset as we find that other questions become more commonly used. In this case, I'll select what time of day do you prefer to work with your team, and in which time zone will you be completing the majority of your coursework. As with our students working largely remote, we need to be able to have a hybrid model for our classrooms and know when people can meet together. And so once selected, we'll click Continue, and we're brought to our basic survey. Here we can fill in a new title, a new description, set the due date, and set which sections of the course, or all sections, that this survey applies to. And we can also create a new question. You'll notice there's a plus question button, which creates a new question for us to go to. Once there, we can change its title, change its type, and add options, as well as change the way the algorithm uses it. Is the distribution similar or dissimilar? Is the priority level very important or not very important?
I just want to add, Will, that this was an important part of the discussion that our students had with their instructors, as each particular assignment requires a different mix. Where you might have one instructor who is looking for students with similar science backgrounds to be in groups. You might have another instructor who's really looking for more heterogeneity in their groups and wanting to spread out that experience. And each assignment is different, which is why this really does need to be in the hands of the instructor as they set up the survey.
And so we've completed our demo question. We've put in some options. We've selected that it's multiple choice, that we want these students to be similar in their responses, and that this can be weighted in the middle. We can complete our survey, and we're brought back to our dashboard where we'll see the current surveys. Once published, we now have a progress meter, this bar around this demo survey title. So now we'll switch over to the student view. A student will also click Team Formation, and they'll be brought to see that there is a demo survey waiting for them to take and when it's due. They can take that survey, and they can answer the questions. And once they've completed all of the questions, the survey returns to complete surveys. When this faculty member logs back in, they'll see, in this case, 1 of 6 students has answered the survey so far. They can now click Manage, and they'll see what student has answered the questions, the answers to those questions, and who has not completed this survey. What we'll do is we'll finish taking the survey and click Generate Groups. In this slide, you'll see that the students have been populated into groups, and we've clicked Write Groups to Canvas. And now we have a message telling us where to go. In the Canvas interface, that's under People, and you'll see a group title. If we go there now, those groups with their unique IDs have been written to this course, and the students have been sorted amongst them.
And as an instructional designer, I just have to say how wonderful this particular feature of the tool really is for the instructor to help them complete their assignment design. This now allows them to take those groups and to assign them a particular discussion board or assignment or set of resources. So being able to integrate that within Canvas is a really crucial part to the tool working.
Another point with this tool is that you can continue to generate groups using this algorithm. The algorithm will come up with different groups each time it's run. And so you can continue to generate groups from the same survey for different purposes.
So as we work through this project together, there are some challenges that we faced and some pain points that we'd like for you to know about and maybe try to avoid. So we'd like to speak to a couple of those now.
The first is integrating the student design and user-facing code with our server and our infrastructure in production. One of these problems is that we need to manage access. We can't give students access to production data, but it certainly has to have access to that live data when we publish it to the Canvas instance in production. Part of that is teaching students how to generalize the code so that when we go in and change the configuration, it just works. But there are always some tweaks that have to be made. Part of that then is us understanding their code. The interesting thing here is that while we often in these projects expect the students to quickly learn our infrastructure and our frameworks like Ruby on Rails, for this project, we had to learn very quickly their frameworks, React.js for the front end, in order to make sure that this application worked correctly. It was interesting for us to see the other side, and really reinforces the value we get out of working with students who can learn these frameworks very quickly and provide excellent code.
Speaking of the different groups and the different strengths, we wanted to talk also about how difficult it is sometimes to do a handoff as these projects exist over time. So we've been working at Dartmouth on this for over a year and a half. And throughout that time, students and staff have both come in and out of the project. We've learned very quickly that documentation is critical and that we have to constantly revisit some of the key questions that have come up maybe in a previous conversation with a slightly different group of people, but that we need to come back to those big points, big goals often in order to make sure that everyone is on the same page. For example, as we worked with our maybe second or third group of students, I recognized that they actually didn't understand what the LTI framework was. And so we had to back up for a minute and have a conversation about that as well. And speaking of what everybody is capable of, I think that as we learn from each other, what the capability of each individual person, but also the roles of the team that they were part of, I think that was an evolving thing that happened over time. Being as explicit as you can at the beginning of a project like this would be really useful. For example, I think in our relationship with the faculty member over time, we've been able to see that her ability to describe the algorithm and change it and also really identify the most important pieces, that's been evolving as well as the development of the tool happened too. And so I think talking together consistently about what everybody's role will be, what their responsibilities are, but also what their strengths and talents are, and what their limitations might be. For example, working within the bureaucracy of a college can be a tricky thing, especially for our very motivated and excited students. And not only do we have limits on staff time, as I'm sure all of you are dealing with, especially now, we also have certain protocols and procedures. We'll talk about the development of some new policies that we were able to work through, but that all takes time. And that can be frustrating sometimes for a faculty member or a student who is able to hand code something that's not in a scalable tool as that transition happens. So patience on behalf of everyone was much appreciated in this project, and definitely would be something that you want to look for as you recruit a potential team at your school. So thank you for sitting with us to talk about the team formation tool. One of your primary questions may be, how do I implement this at my college? And we'd love to talk to you more if that's the case. So here are the email addresses. You can reach Will or I at any time. And we hopefully will stay in touch with you about how this project works at Dartmouth as our faculty continue to implement it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.